What if I told you that somewhere, behind a closed door, a conversation about you has already happened, a conversation you were never supposed to hear, a discussion that might reveal far more about your connection than months of ordinary back and forth ever could? Most of us assume that the biggest turning points in our lives play out right in front of us, in plain sight. But the truth is usually the opposite. The events that quietly reshape our destiny tend to start somewhere hidden, in a private room, inside someone's unspoken thoughts, in a moment of reflection nobody else witnessed. Right now, there could be someone out there who simply cannot stop thinking about you. Someone who has reached the point where your presence in their mind has become impossible to brush aside. Your name, your energy, the mark you've left on their life, all of it may have become something they're seriously sitting with. Questions have been asked. Feelings have been picked apart and examined. Truths that were once buried may have finally surfaced. But here's the part that might catch you off guard. What actually got said in that conversation may not be what you'd expect at all. It might have uncovered fears, hopes, emotions, and realizations that even they didn't fully understand about themselves until that moment. Sometimes the most powerful discoveries aren't really about the other person at all. They're about us, and about how much someone has genuinely gotten under our skin in the best possible way. So stick with me until the end, because what you're about to hear could completely shift how you see this connection and the quiet, unseen forces moving behind it. A private conversation about you signals that you've become deeply significant in someone's inner world. Your presence has sparked reflection, emotional conflict, and questions they can no longer ignore. Your authenticity and connection have left a lasting psychological impression, making you difficult for them to forget or dismiss. Your soulmate may catch themselves thinking about you at the most unexpected moments. Maybe they're buried in daily responsibilities, focused on work, family, or their own personal goals. And out of nowhere, your image drifts into their mind uninvited. They might hear a phrase that reminds them of something you once said, walk past a place that stirs up a memory tied to you, or feel an emotion that somehow traces back to your presence. On the surface, these moments can seem completely random, but psychologically, they reveal something important. The mind naturally circles back to whatever it considers meaningful. Most people like to believe they're in full control of every thought that crosses their mind. But so much of what the mind does actually happens beneath conscious awareness. Deep impressions keep quietly shaping behavior even when someone's attention is aimed somewhere else entirely. This is exactly why meaningful connections can feel so persistent and hard to shake. The individual might try their best to stay focused on practical matters, but part of their attention keeps drifting back to the person who's captured their interest. Not because they're deliberately choosing that every single time, but because something inside them recognizes real significance when it's there. Another reason your energy becomes so hard to ignore is that it may be waking up qualities in them they haven't felt in a very long time. Certain people have a way of reminding us of forgotten parts of ourselves. One person might stir up hope. Another might spark courage. Someone else might encourage a kind of emotional openness that's been closed off for years. These experiences build powerful psychological associations. Instead of simply remembering you as a person, they start remembering how they feel whenever they're around you, and that emotional charge attaches itself directly to the memory. This whole process can feel confusing, honestly, because it doesn't fit neatly into ordinary explanations. A person might find themselves wondering why thoughts of you keep showing up uninvited. They might try to reason it out logically, hunting for a clean explanation behind their growing awareness of you. But some experiences just resist that kind of tidy analysis. The heart and mind don't always follow predictable rules. Sometimes a connection quietly gathers strength beneath the surface, long before it ever becomes fully visible, even to the person experiencing it. As your influence keeps growing, the people around them may start picking up on subtle changes too. Their mood might shift the second your name comes up in conversation. Their attention might sharpen whenever a topic somehow circles back to you. They might seem distracted, more reflective, or unusually interested anytime something connected to you comes up. Even if they try hard to appear neutral about it, the energy of a meaningful connection has a way of leaking out sideways, whether they mean for it to or not. The deeper reason your presence becomes so hard to ignore is that it's stopped being just an external experience for them. It's become woven into their internal reality. You're not only living in their memories anymore, you're showing up in their expectations, their private reflections, their hopes, and their questions about what comes next. The mind pays close attention to whatever it believes actually matters, and when someone keeps circling back to the same person in thought, in feeling, and in imagination, it's a sign that the connection has moved past casual interest and settled into a space of real psychological importance. Questions about the future rarely appear out of nowhere. They tend to surface once something in the present starts feeling significant enough to deserve deeper thought. When your soulmate begins asking themselves questions about where things might be heading, it's a sign the connection has grown beyond a passing curiosity and stepped into a space where actual possibilities are being weighed. People don't naturally pour mental and emotional energy into imagining future outcomes unless they genuinely believe someone or something has the potential to play a real, lasting role in their life. The future itself is this vast psychological landscape shaped almost entirely by uncertainty. Nobody can see it clearly ahead of time, and yet everyone still tries to form some kind of picture of what might come, shaped by their hopes, their fears, their desires, and everything they've personally been through. When another person starts showing up inside that landscape, it signals a real shift in perception. Instead of picturing life as a solo path, the mind starts experimenting with the idea of shared experiences, shared goals, shared emotional journeys. Your soulmate might find themselves genuinely wondering where this connection is heading, even before they can fully explain why. At first, these questions tend to show up quietly, almost without announcement. They might picture how certain situations would feel differently if you were part of them. They might imagine future conversations, future chances to reconnect, or moments that haven't happened yet, but somehow already feel real in their mind. These thoughts often arrive without much fanfare, but they matter, because they show that your presence has worked its way into how this person envisions what's coming next. Part of what makes this kind of future-focused thinking so powerful is that it forces a person to confront what they genuinely value. In everyday life, so many decisions get made almost on autopilot, shaped by routine, obligation, and familiar habits. But once someone starts imagining a future that includes another person, deeper priorities start coming into focus. Questions about compatibility, emotional fulfillment, trust, growth, and long-term happiness start rising to the surface. The person begins examining not just the connection itself, but the entire kind of life they actually want to build. This process often stirs up reflection on the past too. It's human nature to compare a potential future against previous outcomes. If someone has already been through disappointment, heartbreak, or unmet expectations, they're likely to approach new possibilities with a bit more caution. At the same time, meaningful connections have a way of challenging old conclusions someone once thought were settled. A person who used to believe certain dreams were unrealistic might start reconsidering them entirely. Someone who had grown emotionally guarded might begin imagining what real openness could feel like again. The questions that surface aren't always straightforward either. They often come wrapped in uncertainty and contradiction. One part of the mind might feel genuinely excited by the possibility, while another part stays cautious, holding back. One inner voice pushes toward moving forward, while another looks for some kind of reassurance first. This back and forth is a completely natural part of any meaningful connection, because the future always carries some amount of risk. To truly care about someone means accepting that their presence matters, and once someone matters, the eventual outcome starts to carry real emotional weight. As these future-oriented thoughts keep developing, the connection begins quietly shaping decisions in subtle ways. Priorities shift. Certain opportunities suddenly feel more important than they used to. The individual becomes more aware of their own emotional needs, their personal goals, their long-term hopes. Instead of just thinking about what's directly in front of them, they start considering bigger questions about direction, purpose, and companionship. What makes all of this so meaningful is that it reveals real investment. The mind tends to focus its energy on whatever it considers genuinely valuable. When someone keeps returning to thoughts about where a connection might lead, they're giving that connection a real place inside their psychological future. They're no longer treating it as something limited to the present moment. It becomes part of an unfolding story whose next chapters haven't been written yet, but already feel important enough to hold their attention, their emotion, and their imagination. Unexpected truths tend to surface once emotions get too strong to keep hidden any longer. For a while, people can dodge certain realities about themselves, about their feelings, about how much someone else has actually affected their life. They stay busy with distractions, with rational-sounding explanations, with everyday routines. But underneath all of that, the unconscious mind never really stops gathering evidence. Feelings build quietly, observations pile up. Insight develops in places just beyond immediate awareness. Eventually a moment comes when what's been hidden simply can't stay buried anymore. That's when unexpected truths start to reveal themselves. In the context of your soulmate's private conversation, these revelations aren't usually dramatic confessions announced out loud for the world to hear. More often, they show up as realizations that catch even the person themselves off guard. A thought that used to feel uncertain suddenly becomes crystal clear. A feeling that seemed temporary turns out to be far more persistent than they expected. An emotional connection they had underestimated finally starts showing its real depth. The surprise here isn't that the truth was ever missing. It's that it stayed unrecognized for so long. People are remarkably good at hiding things from themselves. Most of us believe we understand our own emotions pretty thoroughly, but so much of our inner world actually runs outside conscious awareness. Feelings can exist and grow long before they're ever fully acknowledged. Someone might convince themselves that another person is just a passing interest, only to discover later that this connection has quietly taken up a much bigger space in their heart than they realized. They might insist to themselves that they're unaffected, all while their thoughts keep drifting back to the same person over and over. These contradictions reveal just how much distance can exist between what people think they feel and what they actually feel underneath it all. Even when feelings stay private, the effects of those feelings often become visible to the people around them, sometimes before the individual even fully understands what's happening inside themselves. This is exactly why others sometimes notice the shift before the person at the center of it does. Every meaningful connection sends out a kind of psychological ripple effect. Thoughts shape emotions. Emotions shape behavior. And behavior shapes the way a person interacts with everyone around them. Family members, close friends, and trusted companions often become especially attuned to these shifts, simply because they already know this person's usual habits and typical moods. They pick up on subtle differences that a stranger might completely miss. A small shift in mood, a fresh sense of excitement, a moment of distraction, an unusual amount of reflection, all of these small signals can point towards something meaningful unfolding underneath the surface. Your soulmate might not openly talk about every single feeling running through them, but emotions have a way of showing themselves indirectly regardless. A person's whole energy tends to shift once they become emotionally invested in someone. They might smile unexpectedly when a certain topic comes up. They might seem more thoughtful than usual, more prone to drifting into memories, imagined possibilities, or conversations connected somehow to the person occupying their mind. The people close to them often notice these small changes and quietly start forming their own conclusions about what might be going on. One reason others tend to pick up on your influence is that meaningful connections have a way of shifting perspective. When someone meets a person who genuinely matters to them, they usually start seeing life a little differently. Their priorities shift. Certain goals suddenly matter more than they used to. Some worries lose their edge, while brand new hopes start emerging. These internal changes naturally show up in how someone speaks, how they make decisions, and how they show up in the world around them. Friends and family watching from the outside may sense that a new influence has entered this person's life. People tend to be especially observant when emotional patterns start changing. If someone who's usually reserved suddenly becomes more expressive, that gets noticed. If someone who normally seems indifferent suddenly shows enthusiasm, curiosity, or unexpected emotional depth, people start asking questions. We're naturally wired to look for explanations behind meaningful shifts in someone's behavior. As a result, the people closest to your soulmate might become aware that someone has genuinely captured their attention long before any formal acknowledgement ever happens out loud. Another important piece of this whole process is that meaningful connections tend to spark real personal growth. When someone feels inspired by another person, they often start developing qualities that had been sitting dormant for a while. They might become more confident, more open-minded, more optimistic, or more willing to face personal challenges they'd been avoiding. These kinds of positive changes rarely go unnoticed. The people around them see the transformation happening and naturally start wondering who or what has been contributing to it. In a lot of cases, others recognize just how emotionally significant this connection is through repeated patterns they observe over time. They notice how often your name comes up in conversation, how frequently certain topics circle back to you, or how much genuine interest shows up whenever something related to you gets mentioned. Even attempts to seem neutral about it can end up unintentionally revealing just how significant the connection actually is. The harder a person tries to downplay or hide something meaningful, the more noticeable certain reactions tend to become to the people paying close attention. What makes this dynamic particularly interesting is that outside observers are often less caught up in personal uncertainty than the person actually going through it. While your soulmate might still be wrestling with their own feelings, friends and family can sometimes see the whole situation with a lot more clarity. They notice the consistent behaviors, the recurring emotional responses, the subtle transformations that all point towards something deeper happening beneath the surface. Through their observations, it becomes increasingly clear that your presence has moved past being just a passing impression and has started shaping thoughts, emotions, and attitudes in ways that are visible not only to the person experiencing it, but also to everyone who knows them well. Every meaningful connection eventually reaches a point where reflection alone stops being enough. Thoughts can circle endlessly. Emotions can quietly deepen over time. Questions can sit unanswered for a long stretch. But sooner or later, something starts shifting toward an actual decision. This shift is usually invisible at first. It doesn't arrive with big dramatic announcements or sudden declarations. Instead, it develops gradually, somewhere deep inside the mind, where possibilities get weighed, emotions get examined, and future outcomes get carefully considered. When a decision starts quietly forming, it means the connection has entered a whole new psychological stage. People naturally crave certainty. The mind doesn't sit comfortably with endless ambiguity forever. Uncertainty can be tolerated for a while, sure, but eventually it starts creating real tension. A person begins feeling the need to figure out exactly where they stand, what they truly feel, and which direction they actually want to move in. This internal pressure gets stronger once real emotions get involved, because meaningful connections demand attention eventually. They refuse to stay unresolved forever. As a result, the individual gradually shifts from just observing the situation toward actually making a choice. Your soulmate may have spent a considerable amount of time picking apart this connection from every possible angle. They may have questioned their own emotions, weighed their experiences, and compared how they feel now against past relationships or old expectations they've carried around for years. None of that kind of reflection is a sign of weakness or confusion. More often, it's a sign that the connection matters enough to deserve real, careful consideration. The deeper the significance of something, the more seriously people tend to approach the decisions surrounding it. A quietly forming decision usually starts with small realizations rather than one big dramatic conclusion. The individual starts noticing patterns they can no longer brush aside. They recognize just how often thoughts of you keep coming back. They become aware of the emotional pull your presence has created in their life. They acknowledge that certain feelings have stayed remarkably consistent over time instead of fading the way they expected them to. These observations build up gradually, like pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together. Each new realization adds to a growing sense of clarity. One of the most important parts of any real decision-making process is the relationship between emotion and reason. A lot of people picture these two forces working against each other, but meaningful decisions usually come together when emotion and reason start moving in the same direction instead. Emotion supplies the motivation and the sense of meaning, while reason weighs practicality and the long-term consequences. When someone is seriously considering an important connection, both of these forces become active at once. The heart is asking what feels meaningful, while the mind is asking what's actually realistic. A real decision starts taking shape once these two voices finally start finding common ground. During this whole process, the individual often has to face fears that had previously stayed hidden: fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of change, fear of uncertainty. All of these can shape the road toward an eventual decision. Meaningful relationships tend to require real courage because they involve genuine emotional exposure. Caring deeply about someone means accepting the possibility of disappointment, but it also means accepting the possibility of real growth, connection, and fulfillment. The person has to decide which of those possibilities deserves more weight in their mind. As clarity keeps building, attention naturally shifts away from everything that's already happened and toward what should happen next. The focus moves away from endless analysis and toward genuine future action. Questions get more specific. Possibilities become more defined. Instead of just wondering vaguely about the connection, the individual starts thinking seriously about how they actually want to respond to it. Their thoughts become less scattered and a lot more purposeful. What makes a quietly forming decision so powerful is that it tends to transform the entire meaning of a connection. Feelings that once existed only as private, internal experiences start moving toward real, intentional direction. Reflection turns into commitment. Curiosity develops into genuine understanding. Uncertainty gradually gives way to purpose, and all of it happens somewhere beneath the surface where nobody else can fully see it. The mind and the heart keep working together underneath, shaping a choice that grows stronger with every realization, every reflection, and every quiet acknowledgement of just how significant this connection has become inside their inner world. As we come to the end of this journey together, one truth stands out clearly. The most important moments in our lives usually begin long before they ever become visible to us. A private conversation, a hidden thought, an unexpected realization, a growing awareness, quiet observations from the people around us, a decision slowly taking shape somewhere beneath the surface, all of these point toward the same underlying reality. Something meaningful is unfolding, even if we can't see it directly yet. Whether these particular events are happening exactly as imagined, or whether they're symbolically reflecting a deeper emotional process at work, they remind us that genuine connections have real power to transform people from the inside out. The greatest relationships in life are never built on force, on desperation, or on constant, exhausting pursuit. They emerge naturally when two people are growing, learning, and becoming more aware of who they really are. Sometimes the answers we're searching for aren't found by chasing certainty at all costs. They're found by trusting the process of life itself and allowing whatever is truly meant for us to reveal itself in its own time. Every meaningful connection carries its own lessons, its own growth, its own opportunities for real self-discovery. The more deeply we understand ourselves, the more clearly we start recognizing the people who genuinely belong in our journey. Thank you for spending this time with me and for exploring these hidden forces that quietly shape our relationships together. Your attention, your presence, and your openness to these ideas mean a great deal. If any of this resonated with you, carry these thoughts forward and take a moment to reflect on how they might connect to your own path. I wish you clarity wherever there's been confusion, confidence wherever there's been doubt, and peace wherever there's been uncertainty. May the connections that are truly meant for you find their way into your life at exactly the right moment, and may you keep growing into the person you're meant to become. Good luck on your journey. Take care of yourself. And remember that some of the most meaningful chapters of your life are still waiting to be written. Thank you, and until next time, stay strong, stay hopeful, and keep moving forward.